Making good on a campaign promise, Donald Trump dumps the TPP, killing off Obama's signature trade deal. Also in today's program, the right to a party. Germany's neo-Nazis survive another attempt to ban their political faction. And in Picture This, dive into the world's first underwater museum. I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Newsmakers. Another day, another promise kept. US President Donald Trump has quit the Trans-Pacific Partnership, just as he pledged during his campaign. The TPP was set to create a massive single market for the Asia-Pacific region, effectively an EU equivalent for 40% of the world's economy. Trump dumping the deal dismantles a key pillar of the Obama administration's Asia policy. The former president promoted the Free Trade Pact as a way of creating thousands of jobs and increasing US exports by billions of dollars. But Trump called it a disastrous move that would hurt American workers. Today's Newsmaker is the TPP, as we ask what's the future of a deal that depended so heavily on US participation.
President Donald Trump has shown that when it comes to 21st century trade, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Great thing for the American worker, what we just did.
What he did was withdraw the US from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, also known as the TPP. Barack Obama's administration spent 6 years negotiating the free trade deal, but it wasn't able to ratify it in Congress. On the campaign trail, Trump labelled it a disaster for America, promising to pull the US from the TPP on day one of his presidency. It took until day 4, but his mission was accomplished, ushering in an era of America First trade policy. The TPP was going to be the biggest free trade deal in history, creating a new single market involving 12 countries from around the Pacific Rim, which account for 40% of the world's economy. Eliminating trade barriers by cutting 18,000 tariffs and setting industry standards in areas like pharmaceuticals and farming. It was meant to make it easier for companies to raise funds across borders, help skilled people find jobs overseas, and exporters compete in foreign markets. And the US, as the biggest economy in the TPP, was underpinning the deal. But there have been consistent pushbacks and protests against it, with critics arguing it would empower big business and erode sovereignty, because the agreement allows foreign corporations to challenge federal, state and local laws in each member country. It was also specifically designed to exclude China. The Chinese are masters of trade. The world's most famous trading route, the Silk Road, began in China. But the TPP was meant to be a counterbalance to the economic might wielded by Beijing. China is already negotiating other regional deals to place it at the heart of trade. And President Xi Jinping sent a clear message about it to Trump.
Pursuing protectionism is just like locking oneself in a dark room. While wind and rain may be kept outside, so are light and air. No one will emerge as a winner in a trade war.
Is that the path the US is now pursuing? Or is it a win for America's workers? Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Singapore is Deborah Elms. She's the founder and executive director of the Asian Trade Center, which works with governments to try and improve trade policy. And from Cyprus, Marshall Gittler. He's the head of investment research at FX Primus, an online trading platform. Thanks both of you for joining us. Marshall, let me start with you. Scrapping TPP, was that a good idea by Trump?
It depends on whether you're a shareholder or a worker. I think probably it was, well, from everything I read, it was tilted in favor of the companies. They wrote a lot of it. And it would have helped companies, to, as the announcer said, to do business across borders. It probably would have boosted profits, boosted trade and boosted profits for the executives and shareholders. Whether it would have been a good thing for the consumers is another question. It might have tightened the trademark protection and patents, which would have made it more difficult to get some kinds of medicines, and might have restricted trade in generics and things like this. So it had its pluses and its minuses.
Okay, so it depends on who you talk to, according to Marshall. Deborah, I've got a quote here which says the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a disastrous trade agreement designed to protect the interests of the largest multinational corporations at the expense of workers, consumers, the environment, and the foundations of American democracy. That wasn't Donald Trump. That was Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail. Did Trump make the right decision, Deborah?
No, I don't think so. I think actually he's going to harm precisely the people that Bernie Sanders said were going to be harmed. I think both of them are wrong on this point. I think the TPP would have helped small companies, it would have helped consumers, it would have helped the environment, it would have helped labor. And killing the TPP for the United States has harmed all of those interests, because it would have made it easier for small firms to flourish. It would have made more jobs in the United States and elsewhere. It would have lowered prices for consumers, especially for products that consumers care a lot about. It would have protected the environment in ways that are very important. It would have helped labor. So I think that killing it, ironically enough, harms the very interests that people are claiming to uphold.
So where did President Obama and the rest go wrong? Was it that the entire thing was sort of couched in secrecy, and it was an enigma wrapped in a riddle and so on? Was that the big problem? Is that where they messed up?
I think they waited too long to, they spent too long behind closed doors. They really could have, they were worried that they were going to lose the narrative. And so instead of coming out and saying, I'm not going to tell you the actual textual details of this, which I think was right, they instead said nothing at all. And saying nothing at all gave years for the opposition to build, to spread the narrative that this, in fact, was going to kill people, kill the environment, destroy labor, destroy workers, etc. And once that narrative got set, got entrenched, it was very difficult for people to say, no, actually, you're wrong when you see the agreement. And then when the agreement came out, it was too late, it was too little, it was too late. And people didn't actually read the text. And in fact, they still haven't read the text to see that that narrative was false, is false, and remains false.
Marshall, in response, and in place of the TPP, Trump promises to create American jobs, to replace it with fair bilateral trade deals. Do you believe him?
Well, I think he's certainly going to try to make bilateral trade deals with all these countries involved. Whether they will be better trade deals or the same, we just don't know yet. I think one of the problems that they had was this dispute settlement mechanism, IDIS, International Dispute Settlement, that would resolve, they allowed companies to resolve disputes by arbitration against governments. And this really raised a lot of suspicions that maybe the people running the arbitration panels would come from companies and would always decide in favor of companies, and that made people very suspicious. I'm not sure that any new trade agreements that they make bilaterally might just have the same settlement dispute mechanism and really be no different.
Deborah, was that a weak point in TPP, the fact that you had corporations with the ability to sue governments in those secret tribunals?
We've had more than 3,000 bilateral investment treaties globally. More than 92% of them have some version of ISDS, the Investor State Dispute Settlement System, in them. Out of 3,000 of these agreements, we have a vanishingly small number of disputes. If you are a company and you want to take recourse and use one of these provisions, you only do so, basically, I describe it as sort of a nuclear option. you only do so if the stakes are really big and you have no other opportunities left. Because once you do this, your opportunities to do business in that country again are shot. So you only do it when the government has in fact violated your rights, you have no other options, and you have no other hope of doing business in the country again. Those conditions are quite rare, and I think that's why they don't get used very often. The reason you put them in is because you want, as a country, to show that you are open for business and that you're not going to go around and seize investor assets left, right, and center.
Okay.
I think they're a good provision.
Okay, let's bring Marshall in. Marshall, you want to come in?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it was a very bad the way they presented it was really terrible. This clause was contained in a secret agreement that wasn't made public. WikiLeaks revealed it, and therefore it got terrible press, even though, as we just heard, most international agreements have this clause already in them. In fact, most of the countries involved in the TPP already have such clauses. So it really isn't anything new, but by being secretive about it and having it come out on WikiLeaks, that just really, as we heard, set the narrative in the wrong direction, and I think really tainted people against the agreement.
Marshall, all the analysis coming out, I'm no economist, I've been trying to read as much as I can about this. A lot of the analysis has said that the Chinese are the ones that gain the most by the United States pulling out. Tell me how China gains.
Well, as we heard from Mr. Xi at Davos, that they're appearing to be the free traders of the world, and America is appearing to be more isolationist. Of course, patent protection, et cetera, in China isn't what it is in other countries, so maybe they benefit more from free trade than some other people do. But they are seen as favoring a more open and more global trading system now than the U.S. is. They don't come out and say right up front, China first, as Mr. Trump has said. So they look like they're now the egalitarian, globally minded country, whereas the U.S. is turning into a mercantilist, protectionist state. It's really a big reversal.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Of their global position.
So, Deborah, if the Chinese are strengthened, the United States pulled out, is that why the Japanese are freaking out?
Well, it's very difficult for Japan and for anyone who has counted on the U.S. to back them up in security and in economic terms. I think it's very challenging for Japan. It's very challenging for Singapore. It's in general here in Asia, we're watching what has been the bedrock of stability for economics and for politics and for security suddenly decide to do something fundamentally different. And I think everyone in this region is trying to say, is this a temporary thing? Is this going to change? How far do we need to worry? Is the U.S. suddenly untrustworthy in lots of other areas? If they turn to bilateral agreements, are they going to be equally untrustworthy? And I think this is where credibility is really taking a hit for the United States. How much can you trust the United States to deliver? Is it just on trade? Is it broader? Is it deeper? And I think that is something that we are all waiting to see how the Trump administration unfolds. Early signs already in week one are deeply alarming, particularly for those of us here in Asia, but I would argue much more broadly than that.
Mm-hmm. Marshall, you used the words mercantilist and protectionist. Does that mean, possibly, that NAFTA is going to be next to be torn up?
Oh, that's a foregone conclusion. If not torn up, at least renegotiated. I mean, that was President Trump's view from a long time ago. In fact, I would expect that by the end of the week, that he reopens negotiations with Mexico and Canada on NAFTA.
Yeah, he's been moving fast. Okay, it's been a pleasure, Marshall Gettler and Deborah Elms. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us. In Germany, it's long been illegal to deny the Holocaust and use Nazi symbols, and yet more than a decade of legal efforts have failed to ban the country's neo-Nazi party. And now they've survived another attempt with the Supreme Court ruling that the far-right National Democratic Party, or NPD, is not violating the Constitution. That's despite judges agreeing the group wants to impose an ethnically based authoritarian regime. Even the National Spy Agency testified against them. But it wasn't enough to convince the court the party poses an actual threat. So is the ruling a win for freedom of political expression or a dangerous risk for the nation? Yvette McCullough reports.
Neo-Nazi, racist, and anti-Semitic. The words many use to describe Germany's National Democratic Party. But last week, the Constitutional Court rejected a bid to have the party banned.
Für die Partei ein großer Erfolg und ich habe es in den Gesichtern der Minister und Ministerialbeamten gesehen, dass sie eine Klatsche bekommen haben.
The court heard evidence from the German intelligence agency saying that NPD has links to violent neo-Nazis and that it wants an ethnically defined authoritarian system which goes against the constitution. The court agreed, but found there was no concrete evidence the NPD poses a serious threat. Established in 1964, the NPD only has around 5,000 members. It has never won a seat in the federal parliament, and in September, it lost its last seat in the regional assembly. It has just one seat in the European Parliament. So, in the eyes of the court, the NPD doesn't pose a real democratic threat. For the NPD, this ruling is a vindication.
Denn jetzt gibt es nichts mehr zu befürchten. Das Verbot ist dann nach dem heutigen Urteil vom Tisch. Und dann können wir wieder richtig durchstarten und uns endlich wieder unserer eigentlichen Aufgabe widmen, nämlich an der politischen Willensbildung des Volkes.
Denn diese Partei ist im Kern rassistisch. Sie will ein Rückführungsprogramm, das letztlich Millionen erreicht. Das heißt, wenn man das umsetzen wollen würde, würde man Bürgerkrieg machen.
The ruling comes during a resurgence of the far right in Germany. Riding a wave of anti-refugee sentiment, the far-right Alternative for Germany party is growing in popularity. It's polling at around 15% and is poised to win seats in Parliament in this year's elections. While the AfD distances itself from groups like the NPD, it has attracted many of its members since being formed in 2013. Is this ruling a win for the far-right in Germany? And does allowing such extreme views to exist on the fringes risk pushing the mainstream even further right? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Okay, I'm joined now from Berlin by Hugh Bronson. He's a politician with the German political party AfD, or Alternative for Germany. They're not the ultra-nationalist NPD, but are still seen as being on the right end of the political spectrum. I hope you consider that fair. Hugh, you agree with the Supreme Court decision, as far as I understand, that the NPD shouldn't be banned. Tell me why.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me for this interview. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And to answer your question, it is the rule of the law. The Constitutional Court has decided that this party poses no threat to our system, no threat to the democracy in our country, and has rightfully decided not to ban this party.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Supreme Court says, look, they don't have the capability or the strength or the power, but it does admit with the intelligence agencies that these guys are anti-Semitic, they're racist, and they don't hold very nice views. I wonder, from your perspective, do you like them, do you support them, or do you dislike them?
I don't like them, I don't support them, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to vote for the NPD. They are, although very small, they are in disarray, they're not organized, their financial affairs are in trouble, they don't pose a threat to society, but they're being closely watched by intelligence, and reports are coming back that accordingly, they are not posing a serious threat.
From those who leave the NPD and come over to your party, the AfD, what's their reason? Is it a change of heart or is it strategic?
There's a ruling in our party. We do not accept members of the NPD, former members of the NPD, in our fold. So if during a questionnaire it's been clear that this person has voted or worked for, not voted, but worked for the NPD or was a member of the NPD, they will not be allowed to become a member of the AFD.
Mm-hmm. Now, from the outside, as people try to understand the nature of the right in Germany, the far right, and who tips over into neo-Nazism, and so on, there's a piece of news that just came through over the past 24 hours that I guess isn't good news for your party. It involves the Thuringian AFD leader Björn Höcke, who called the Holocaust Memorial a, quote, monument of shame. You would understand why many from the outside looking in would think, well, hold on, this guy's a neo-Nazi. This sounds like neo-Nazism. Do you condemn that?
We had previous utterances of people, amongst them Rudolf Augstein, a left journalist, or the literate Martin Walser, who said exactly the same thing. A shame for Germany means to have this huge monument in the very center of Berlin. Of course, that is debatable. We are distancing ourselves from far-right positions, and clearly this is not the main policy of our party.
Well, you just explained basically what he said to me. So again, I don't want to put words in your mouth and make it, and say that you have condoned it. So I'm going to give you the full quote here. Not only did he say it was a monument of shame, he said, "These stupid politics of coming to grips with the past cripple us. We need nothing other than a 180-degree reversal on the politics of remembrance." And now, when we're talking of remembrance, of course, we're talking about the German nation led by the Nazis, starting a world war, killing tens of millions of people, including 6 million Jews, and that's why there's a Holocaust memorial. So I ask you again, do you condemn what he said about having that memorial to remember what happened?
Yes, I condemn these views, and so does the federal board of the AFD. They issued a warning. They want to have an investigation. Why he said it, this is clearly not the view shared by the majority of people working for the AFD. So I distance myself and the federal board quite clearly from these utterances.
Okay, should he be fired?
It will be very difficult. German party law, it's easier to get divorced than to kick a member out of a party. This is the party law. We have to follow the law, and it is not as easy as it sounds, as it is in Austria, for instance, where you can very easily kick someone out who doesn't follow the party line.
Would you like him to be kicked out?
Well, he should be warned. This is not helping us. This is not beneficial for the party, because right now I'm having this discussion with you instead of talking about politics, about what we want to do, how we want to change the nature of this country. We have to talk about one single member saying a stupid thing in public, and that is a disgrace, and this is a waste of time for us.
As I've gone through some of your material, your party platform, what's available in the English language, there's a lot of talk of being against Muslim immigration because Germany is a culture of Judeo-Christian values. What does that mean?
You have to look at the history of Germany and the history of Central Europe. It's been built on 3 pillars, which is the capital in Rome for its law system, on the Acropolis in Athens for its democratic values, and on Israel for its Christian and Judaic tradition. These 3 main influences have shaped Germany and Central Europe.
So was what happened in the 1930s and 40s an expression of Judeo-Christian values?
These 12 brown years, as I call them, are a disconnection of civilization, of culture. It was a disaster. Germany had to pay dearly for it. It was a major historical mistake. Germany is a cultured nation with a tradition of humanity, with a tradition of enlightenment, of philosophy, of poetry, of music. And these brown years cannot be explained in this context.
Okay, Hugh Bronson, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you very much for joining us. In today's Picture This, we plunge 14 meters underwater to submerge you in the remarkable work of sculptor and photographer Jason DeCaries Taylor. Take a look. Thanks for watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Next time, India's constitutional conundrum. On National Day, we ask if the country is upholding its highest laws under Prime Minister Modi's watch. Until then, bye-bye.